For the next few minutes, we will look at the changes in the areas shown on the map from the early 1950s. The changes are most clearly shown by looking at how the shop fronts have changed. There have also been changes in the personalities who worked and walked in this area, and we will look at those too. Perhaps the most dramatic change has been the loss of the petrol station and garage owned by Dean's, which was actually on the crossroads itself, as you can see. Changes were on the way, as this photo from 1982 shows. We've come up to date. Since the M1 came, the traffic has increased greatly, and the junction, which is Clowne's busiest, has had to be transformed with traffic lights and, for walkers, pedestrian push-button controlled crossings on each road. In the early 1950s, there were 7 shops and a garage. The garage was also a shop and sold paraffin and mantles for the pressure paraffin lamps. Also, they sold gas mantles. Quite a few folk did not have electricity, and for most of those who did, it was mostly 30 cycles from Staveley Works gas engines. Central is Eric and Mary Turner's grocery shop. They were very pleasant to all. And at Christmas, all customers were given a £1/4 box of Cadbury's milk tray chocolates. This gives another view of Turner's shop from Cresswell Road. This one shows an East Midlands Staveley Works bus from Barrow Hill. Turner's shop looks quite smart in this photo, which also shows the police station with a brass band marching by and a few onlookers on the corner. The new brickwork and windows now show Eric and Mary Turner's shop has closed and become living accommodation. Seen from Cresswell Road, the new panel of bricks is more obvious. It was quite a narrow road, with no footpaths. Rotherham Road has always flooded at intervals of a few years. This photo and the next 2 were taken in 1960. We don't have a date for this one. Here are a few photos before Rotherham Road was widened. This is the approach into the village now, showing the recently widened road. And here's the car park for the new police station. Where Sharman's house was standing in its orchard, there's now a small housing estate. This is North Road today. We have moved down North Road to the only shop which still remains. The carpet shop now was formerly Dolly Jones' sweet shop. A friend of ours lived in the row near the shop and daily cycled down to Eckington where he worked. Early each morning he picked up his cycle from the store next to the outside toilet block. As he passed Dolly's toilet door, it would be wide open so she could see to read. Dolly would say, "Good morning, Fred," and he would reply, "Good morning, Dolly." Although sitting on the toilet, she was completely hidden by the large open newspaper she was reading. In those days, newspapers were all large broadsheets. The small tabloids we have now were not printed at that time. Opposite Dolly's sweet shop was Foster's Butcher's. Busy at that time, so there were always comments and greetings whilst customers waited to be served. The weekend joint was often delivered by bicycle. At that time, most families had quite a large joint of meat delivered to cook on Sunday. They often had large families, and typically the joint was cooked in a coal-fired side oven. The butcher's shop is now living accommodation. The Co-op was also a busy shop at that time. There were plenty of customers around. If you were pressed for time, you could hand in your Co-op order book and your order would be delivered to your door by cycle on the allotted day. The new brick panel shows exactly where the Co-op was, and like the others, it's now a private house. To the right of the Co-op was Lowbridge's. They were the first in the area to have a really large freezer and sold frozen food and ice cream. Like the others, it's now converted to private accommodation. Last on that side was Booth's fruit and vegetable shop. Mrs. Booth was always in the shop and was very busy. She had 2 daughters, Nellie and Iris. When Mrs. Booth retired, the shop was taken over by Mr. and Mrs. Page. Harold Page ran the shop whilst Joan Page taught English at Cresswell Markland School. She also wrote numerous models. These were about family life in this area, in historic settings. Joan sold copies to interested local villagers. And also gave a copy of them all to Clowne Library. Across the road beyond Pantile was Eric Ford's, the last shop. It was a beer-off and general store. One little girl went to him and raised a smile when she said, "I want a lucky packet for my mum, please." Eric duly handed over the packet and said, "That will make your mum happy for this month." Eric sold the shop when he retired and moved. The shop became the house it now is. Back at the crossroads on Cresswell Road, facing Eric Turner's, was the Barlborough and Clowne telephone exchange. At that time, only farmers, doctors, police and businesses had telephones. We are very fortunate that Linda Davis, née Purdy, whose family ran the exchange from 1944 to 1961, has written a very detailed and readable document. At the time Linda's family moved into and took over the telephone exchange, Linda was 9 years old. Linda says, "Coming to live at the exchange was the most vividly remembered part of my life. For the first lesson I had to learn was that I took second place to that all-important room on the ground floor, which contained all that mysterious equipment. All my meals, my bedtime, my homework, everything could only involve my parents if no one in Clowne or Barlborough wanted to make a phone call. The three of us could never go out together." Linda's front garden at the telephone exchange was a good place to stand, for you could see all the comings and goings on Barlborough Road. One of the interesting events at the time was Lord Grey's walk into the village. You could hear him before you could see him. He had a loud, deep, booming voice and greeted everyone as he walked from his home in Barlborough into Clowne. He was a kind and generous man. His greetings were, "Good morning, my good fellow," and for ladies, "Good morning, madam," and if they were ill, old or infirm, the greeting became, "Good morning, my dear, how are you today?" He lived opposite the church in Barlborough, in the little valley. Here at Barlborough House, and thanks to the Barlborough Heritage Centre members, it now has a plaque on the gatepost. Two or three times a week he would walk into Clowne to shop at what was, at that time, the best shop in the area, the Central Co-op, which stood where the Aldi block is today. If he was to call on someone, he would buy Jaffa oranges. As he walked back to Barlborough, he would call on anyone who was ill, and one he called on was Granny Fenton, who lived with her family on Pantile. He would give her a huge Jaffa orange, saying, "Hello, my dear. How are you today?" He was a very kind and considerate man, friendly to all. He was our least well-off lord, and couldn't take up his place in the House of Lords until they created the expenses allowance. He lived within his means at Barlborough House, and here he's pictured with his housekeeper. He never married, saying there just was not enough money. There have probably not been many occasions on which a village has collected money for their local lord to take up his place in major events in London. But it happened in Barlborough. We hope that we have reminded you of a time when things were simpler, a time when we all knew our neighbours and locals better, because we constantly met them as we shopped in our local shops. We hope that we have reminded you too of a few local characters, like Dolly Jones in her sweet shop, of Joan Page and her novels set historically in our local setting, and Lord Grey with his deep booming voice and his generous nature. And we hope that we have helped you to remember a few of your favourite local characters from that time. The Heritage Centre is on Ward Lane, beside the schools which are behind the Misper Arch. The centre is in what was the old headmaster's house. It's a real treasure trove of information from the past about Barlborough and the area, and copies are instantly available of most things, all at a nominal cost. Groups can book a conducted walk around the village or a group visit to see inside the Barlborough Hall. Currently, the Heritage Centre is staffed by volunteers and is open on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday mornings. The centre has videos of the best walks around Barlborough and many discs of still photos of the area. Now we're back to the Heritage Centre, where most of their walks start and finish. And Neil and John, both volunteers, are on duty this morning.